Hey everybody, welcome back to the Zelo Zone. Matt calling your host here as always, and with me today is the awesome, of course, GPA. Jeff, how are you doing, man? Welcome to the Zelo Zone.
Doing very well. It's a very interesting time in the world right now.
It's quite the interesting time, to say the least. Appreciate you taking the time to hang out and chat with me today. We got to see you a little bit a couple weeks ago when we were chatting with Lainey, which was fun, and we said we had to get you on here ourselves. So here we are. Similar question that I've been posing to everybody. How is quarantine treating you? What are you doing to stay sane and busy and kind of get through a day in the life?
Yeah, I mean, it's every day is kind of the same at this point. There's not a lot of routine to our days.
It's weird.
Kind of wake
It's
up.
weird.
Yeah. You just basically wake up whenever. Maybe work out, maybe not.
Right.
Our big exciting activities every day is usually just taking a walk around the neighborhood, or maybe driving out to another neighborhood and walking around that one. So, yeah, I mean, it's there's really not much going on, but at the same time, we're both very healthy, and our families are healthy. So, like, that's the most important thing. I'll take boredom over tragedy any day.
1,000. Couldn't agree more, man. As long as it's great that you guys are doing well. Great to hear that you're all safe and healthy. And fingers crossed that it continues to stay that way as we continue to kind of navigate through all of this and get to the other side. And what is it like being in Chicago right now? You know, I know the weather's a kind of little bit iffy on a day-to-day basis. You guys got some snow recently. Is that making things a little bit more difficult to be at home when there's some days that you can't get outside?
I mean, yeah, but it's funny. Like, there's a sort of a conflict going on within me a lot of the times where, yeah, the natural instinct to say, "Oh, I wish it was nice outside so we could go out and do things and just enjoy ourselves." But I'm also kind of dreading the nice weather because it's going to tempt people to go outside and gather up, and so in a way, all this bad weather has kind of been a weird blessing in a way because it's discouraging people from going out and doing the dumb things they're probably going to do. So yeah, we did have snow a couple days ago, but it's nice and sunny today, and it's Sunday as we're doing this. So I can already feel myself tensing up a little bit, waiting for the news stories to come out. Like, oh, crowds of people are gathering all over the city to celebrate the nice weather, and it's just. I don't know. It's a weird time. So yeah, it does make it a little bit difficult when it's snowy and gray out there. But I think that at this point, I'll take as much of that as we can get.
That's a very good point. And as much as some of these laws and regulations are supposed to force people to stay in, sometimes it's working, sometimes not, as we've seen. So to adverse weather, somewhat forcing people, especially in the Midwest, to stay in is probably not the worst thing in the world right now, especially when we're left to our own choices and devices, whether we follow along with those things or not. Because we've seen a lot of ignorance and stupidity going around out there right now, to say the least. So I feel where you're coming from and fully support that. So while you guys are doing what you're doing, when you are being able to kind of work out and go hang out, are you guys primarily working out at home? Are you guys getting some workouts in outside, or making use of your environment in ways that you maybe need to get a little creative?
Yeah, everything to this point has pretty much been at home. That lady's been a lot more innovative and strict about it than I have.
Sure.
I'd say the first maybe week or two, I was pretty adamant about, okay, I'll do some squats and I'll do push-ups, and everybody was doing the challenges like, oh, you got to do 10 push-ups and do 20 sit-ups and all this, and so I was trying to stay pretty strict, and then as it became clear that this was all going to start stretching out a lot longer than we anticipated, I eased back on my daily workouts and all that. So I mean, as far as what we do, it's mostly at home stuff. We actually did start DDP yoga, which we both enjoyed.
Oh, I like DDP yoga. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was one of those I'd always kind of had in my mind to maybe mess around with, but when life was busier, it was like, oh, I don't have time. I got to do this. I got to do that. But now we have nothing but time, so we messed around with that. We'll do runs around the neighborhood every now and then. We'll do circuits with we'll do a sprint and then some lunges and stuff like that around the neighborhood just to get out, get a new environment. But yeah, for the most part, it's just kind of at home stuff. And Lainey has rigged up a bunch of sort of makeshift weights. Like, she has some fanny packs that she's put a bunch of change into. And
that's awesome.
We have little little like sandbag things. We both have our championship belts that
there you go.
backed in weight. So
use them.
Yeah, exactly. The benefits of success, you know. But yeah, it's just kind of been, making the most of what we have, which is unfortunately is not much. But as this goes on, I think we'll both probably invest in some more equipment for the house, just because at this point, God knows how long we're going to be under these conditions. So we're doing what we can with what we've got.
Absolutely, and really that's all you can do at this point. So let's get into wrestling a little bit, as that's what the majority of our viewers are privy to. We talked to Mason Conrad last week a little bit, and he you made mention of training together early on when you were getting started. So I just want to go back to the beginning a little bit, because I don't know if I have ever heard your origin story in any capacity. So I'm just curious as to, we've seen that you've always been a wrestling fan. You've shown some pictures before of wrestlers that you've met growing up, and some pictures from your younger days. So obviously wrestling has always been an interest for you. So I'm just curious as to when that notion of it becoming a pursued reality as to something you're participating in came about, and then how you actually got your start in terms of training to pursue this as a career.
So my interest in wrestling is lifelong.
Yeah.
I was 7 years old the first time I just happened to see it. I was flipping channels, which is something we used to do back then.
Sure.
You actually didn't know it was on TV. You had to search around for it. But, I was flipping channels at my grandparents' house, and it was one of those love at first sight kind of things. Like, as soon as I saw it, I knew that this was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. I didn't understand it. It was just bright colors and people jumping around and, crowds screaming their heads off. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I was in love with it. So it was one of those that, before that I was a basketball fan. I was, just kind of a regular kid. I was into comic books and all that. But as the years went on, I understood that, despite what I was learning in school, despite my other sports interests, this is really kind of what I wanted to focus my life around. So it really became overwhelming around high school, I would say, because I was a pretty good student up until, I've always been a good student, obviously, GPA, but in terms of my dedication to school, it started to wane right around sophomore year of high school, because I knew that really all I wanted to do was pursue a life in wrestling. And so, what did I need algebra for, and what did I need to understand, physics for, certain things that are actually applicable to wrestling. But overall, I hated having to waste all my time on this stuff, knowing where I inevitably wanted to end up. So, my high school years kind of took an interesting route, and then it just got to the point where I had to tell my mom, look, I'm sorry, but I gotta pursue this. And what's funny is that I made a tactical error in telling her, because as a family, we watched the movie The Wrestler.
Oh boy!
Right before I told her what I wanted to do.
Oh man, not the best depiction of said wrestling world.
No, it's not exactly a fairy tale story. So she was very unhappy with that conversation when I first broke the news to her that this is what I want to do. But it's one of those things where once I started the ball rolling and she saw how I was dedicated to it, saw how I was composing myself, she warmed up to the idea. But so I was around. I actually started a little bit later than most people do. It was, I want to say 23. I believe I was when I first started.
Okay.
So
it was after high school.
Yeah, right after high school. I know some people, you hear the classic tales of people that are wrestling right out of the womb.
Sure.
There's some people that start when they're teenagers, and so I waited, because I've always felt that you need to be physically mature enough to handle a life in wrestling.
Yeah.
I feel like everybody that I've come across who started when they were a lot younger, they've already accumulated a bunch of nagging injuries. They're wrapping their knees up, they've got bad necks, bad backs, and all that. And so just kind of reading up on wrestling before I got into it, I understood that there was a certain level of preparedness that I needed going into it. So I wanted to wait, let my body develop and sort of get my mind right, get everything set for a life in this industry.
Yeah.
So
did you play sports in school?
I wanted to, but
Yeah.
it took a while for my physical skills to develop. I was always pretty naturally athletic, but that was more when I was kind of a kid, and
Yeah.
then in high school, I started watching baseball, and I was really, really into it. And I hadn't been working out, I hadn't been doing anything physical, but I knew from a kid that I was pretty naturally athletic. So it's one of those where they put a sign up for baseball tryouts, and I was like, well, I watch a lot of baseball, and I can run and do things like that. So I'm sure this is a breeze. So
Sure.
I showed up. I showed up, and the first thing we did was just run, just run to get warmed up, and then grab a mitt and grab a ball and just throw to somebody, find somebody, throw back and forth. And I was so bad at those two things alone that the coach pulled me aside and he just said, "You know what, buddy? We're not going to use you. So you can go
Oh
ahead.
man.
You can go ahead and finish out the day. But yeah, this is the end of the line for you
And this was
for
in
your
high school?
baseball." Yeah. This was I want to say maybe sophomore year of high
Okay.
school. So yeah, my baseball dream died that day, but it was actually a good lesson because it told me that if I do want to get into something like wrestling, I got to do a lot more preparing than just watching it on the couch for a few weeks. So
Yeah, that's
um,
fair. So did you
so yeah,
have
but
before getting into anything in relation to training for wrestling, did you have any kind of exposure to the wrestling world outside of WWE and watching it on TV? Were you aware of the independent wrestling scene or go to any local shows in Chicago?
not really. I've I've always liked picking up, like, I don't know, people still do it nowadays, but there were always the wrestling magazines at, like,
Right.
Walgreens or newsstands or whatever. So I would pick those up, and they always had the sections in the back that had pictures from local shows, and you would see guys like Reckless Youth and all these
Yeah.
various indie names that like I was aware of them, but I never really took a deep dive into what indie wrestling was all about. So I didn't quite know what it was. Right before I started, CM Punk was really gaining a lot of traction
Mm-hmm.
on the independent level, and I saw a couple promos of his on YouTube, and I sort of discovered what Ring of Honor was, and that was my first big independent company that I was exposed to was Ring of Honor, and I ended up getting a few of their DVDs, but um, the first independent show I went to was for the company that I signed up with, and it was like maybe a week or two before I started training. But that was my first show. Was like literally right before I got business.
Gotcha. And what company was that?
That was Pro Championship Wrestling.
PCW, yeah.
They were an offshoot of Windy City, and they were around for a number of years. They were one of the more prominent Chicago indies up until they closed around 2012, 2013, I believe.
So you came across them how and how did you said that's where you first started training? How did that come about?
So what I did was I just did a Google search for Chicago pro wrestling training, and
that's how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, how else do you do things nowadays? But the only thing that came up, the only two results that came up were Windy City and PCW.
Yeah.
So I called both companies. The first company I called was Windy City, and I talked, I believe, to Sam DeCero directly. And I just asked, so is it something where I can come by and just sort of scope out the school and get an idea? And what kind of rubbed me the wrong way is that it was, you had to sign up and pay sight unseen. You had to go, you had to have full faith in them to compose themselves the right way. You had to pay everything up front, and not until you were paid could you walk in the door. So that didn't rub me quite the right way, and I called BCW, and they could not have been more casual about it. They were like, "Oh yeah, come by, watch. You can come up for several weeks if you want. Like, we don't care, whatever."
Yeah.
So I went to one of their practices after that first phone call with them, and it was so nothing. Like, in my head, I had the performance center in my head even before
it existed.
that was a thing. Yeah, I just had this big, sprawling location with trainers and equipment, and I had all the visions in my head. When I got there, it was in Oak Lawn, the training facility.
Yeah.
So I pull up and I get out of my car, and I'm in this very nice suburb, and I get out and I'm like, all right, I don't see any factories, I don't see any warehouses, I don't understand what this is, and all of a sudden I kind of, and I actually called my mom. I was like, hey mom, I don't know where I am. I don't know what's going on. And as I'm talking to her, I hear faintly in the background like slamming, grunting, and yelling, and I'm like, where's that coming from? And so I walked down the block, and it was actually in a garage. Like it was literally just
of a house.
a ring. Yeah, yeah. It was just a ring inside of a garage. Like it took up the entire like width of the garage. It was just you open the door and there's the ring. And there were two guys in there who were training, and the trainer was sitting off to the side. And I came in, just said, "Hey, I'm Jeff. I'm just here to kind of scope the place out." And they were like, "Oh yeah, just take a seat on the side, and if you have any questions or whatever, you can talk to us afterward." And the exercise they were doing was the trainer would call out. He would say, "Okay, you are Hulk Hogan and you are Ric Flair. Act out the first 5 minutes of the match that they would have," because they wanted to test their knowledge as wrestling fans, and also their ability to kind of work on the fly and adopt the sort of persona you were given. So it was really interesting exercise. And of course, in my head, even though I hadn't even done step one, I was like, I could do this. I know it. I know what Ric Flair would do in the situation. I know what Hulk Hogan would do in the situation. So that let me know that that's the spot that I needed to be in. It wound up being the right choice for me.
Now, did you go to training prior to going to one of their shows, or which one came first?
I believe, I want to say I went to the show first. And it was a complete stark contrast to what I was used to.
Yeah.
I had TV wrestling in my head, so, bright lights, millions of people, and cameras, and all this, and it was very bare bones. It was at the Midlothian, rec center or something.
Okay.
And it was just this big open gymnasium. All the lights were on. Just a ring sitting in the middle of it. Maybe 100 people sitting around the ring. And so it was. It was very unspectacular, but at the same time, it was very appealing.
Sure.
It was like, wow, this is right there. This is my dream. It's literally within reaching distance.
Right.
So,
you can walk right up to the ring. You're as close as you. It's funny because my first independent wrestling experience was also PCW. I came across it via a flyer from Best Blockbuster at the time, and it was at Waukegan High School. The main event was Just Incredible against Lethal Lee, and there was some guys that we still know now, like Egotistico Fantastico was on the show, Tony Scarpone, and it was certainly surreal because you could sit anywhere you wanted to. There may be 100 people there at best, and they're just kind of doing their thing, but you get to see it up close and is really eye-opening to what professional wrestling really is before you get to that big show and whatnot. And I remember going to a handful of PCW shows over time, and I forget what their big WrestleMania event was called, but there was a couple of those that we had gone to over time before it all kind of shifted to AAW overtime. So how did that go then for you? You get in there and you start training. Did you stick with them for a while, and where did that get you to the point of eventually starting to work on your own?
Yeah, I was with them literally until they closed the doors. So I started training in the summer of 2009. Had my first match in spring of 2010, and I was with them until they closed, which, like I said, I think it was, I want to say maybe 2012 or could have been 2014.
Yeah.
The years run together at
Right.
this point. But I was with them all the way until the end, and one of those kind of way the wrestling works. So I knew a few of the guys. One of the crews that I ran with, they were also working for Galley, which was and is a local Lucha Libre company. And they brought me along because they had a benefit show for Jerry Lynn, who was undergoing I think back surgery or something at the time. And they brought me along just to kind of hang out and make connections or whatever. And so I went there, met a few people, just sort of put my face out there, got familiar, and I showed up to another show of Galley's after that. And my first Galley show as an active participant, I was actually the referee.
Okay.
I just showed up with my crew of guys who were all booked, and everybody was gathered up, and all of a sudden, Carlos is looking around like, uh-oh, we have no referee for tonight. So
Classic,
which is
yes.
very, very typical indie wrestling. walk out like, we're missing something. Referee. So he just so happened to have a referee shirt. So the guys sort of put my name out there, like, hey, this guy's got a brain in his head, and he can count to three. So like, what do you think of this guy? And he's like, yeah, whatever. Just threw me the shirt, and there I was, working my first galley show, and I had literally every match on the show too, like not even just a couple. Oh man, there.
That's a lot of matches in a galley show.
yeah, there's a lot of matches, and it was scary too because like I couldn't go to the back and talk to the guys like, hey, what do you have planned? What's going on? Like I just had to sit out there and just trust them to tell me what I had to know.
Right. And did you know anything about lucha style at the time? Because there is a pretty significant difference.
yes, there is. No, I really didn't know much about it. Like I'd watched Rey Mysterio and guys on TV, but in terms of like the intricate movements and patterns that happen within a lucha match, I had no idea how any of that worked. So
you had a front row seat for it.
Yeah, no, and I remember being terrified because like there'd be matches where everybody in it was a lucha guy and none of them spoke English. So I remember a couple times guys would make their entrances and I had to go up and just say like, hey man, finish. And he's like, and so he's nervous himself too. So he's trying to put his own finish. And I'm sitting there like, maybe spark me up here, but it really actually went pretty well, all things considered. Like there were no major incidents, nothing got screwed up too badly, apart from typical indie show stuff. So it was a lot of fun. It was a good learning experience.
And did you start working for Galley after that point?
Yeah, well, shortly after that, I would say probably within the next maybe 3-4 shows, they ended up finding spots for me. And I was just a journeyman guy at Galley for a long time, just kind of throw me in here, throw me in there. I felt like I was married to the guys that I showed up with because he had all the PCW guys working together almost every show for our first probably 6 months there. Just nothing but various combinations of 6-mans and tag teams. And so then eventually I transitioned away from them. And it was really after PCW closed and those guys kind of tailed off and I was able to sort of separate myself, sort of establish my own identity outside of just being a PCW guy.
Yeah. Now, did you have the GPA persona as we know it today back then in the PCW days? Was that always the character that you were putting out there, or did that develop later?
It's pretty much been the same thing the whole time. Like my name has always been the same. The look has been generally the same. That was one of the real good things about PCW. I know certain places kind of tell you, or at least back then they told you like who you are, what you did. Didn't give you a lot of creative freedom, but to PCW's credit, they trusted me to kind of take the reins on what I was doing. So my first several shows there, I didn't even wrestle. I was just doing promos.
Oh, really?
They would have me go out. Yeah, they had me go out, just stand in the ring in front of however many people that were there, and just cut a promo, establish myself, tell them who I am and what I'm about.
Do you think that your start at PCW and them having you start out by cutting promos and not wrestling kind of helped you hone that part of your craft?
Yeah, I think so. The original plan was actually for me to cut recorded promos because the first show that I did, they filmed a promo in the back with me and they said they were going to play it on like the big screen that they had at the shows. And of course, with it being indie wrestling, there was technical difficulties. Sure. And like 5 minutes before the show started, they said, hey, we can't get it to work, so we're just going to have go out there and just do it in front of the ring, in front of the people. So I was like, okay, I'll do it, I guess. Yeah. But I feel like that point in time was right about the time when things were transitioning from characters and sort of the auxiliary stuff into more of the in-ring work.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, the in-ring work is the meat and potatoes of pro wrestling, but I feel like it definitely helps to have that understanding of your character to the point where if somebody does stick a camera in your face or a microphone in front of you, you should be able to just speak as if you are that person because you are that person.
Right. So part of your time there, I guess, when you were first starting, you got to wrestle Goldust. What was that like? I know it's a fond moment for you.
Yeah, that was it was actually something that I didn't find out about until the day of. So the way PCW would handle some of the guests that would come in, some of the name talent, is they would bring them in. They wouldn't usually wrestle matches, but they would give them like a segment just to kind of come out, wave to the people, cut a short promo, and then usually one of the local heels would come out and, you know, say a little something and get bopped with their signature moves and then run off into the night. So,
Sure.
So when Goldust showed up, like I'd never been given any indication that I was going to be a part of that. So I think right before he got there, so we all had to show up and set up the ring and everything. So it was a few hours before showtime, and the decision makers pulled me aside and they said, "Hey, we're kind of thinking of putting you in there with Goldust." So like I had a match scheduled. I said, "Yeah, I think we're going to have you, you know, have your match, and then afterward, basically call Goldust out. You guys will do a quick little thing, and then, you know, he'll bump you and you run off." And so of course, in hearing that, you have to play it cool, you know, because if I wet myself and started crying, they probably would have gone, you know what? Actually, on second thought, we'll pick somebody else. But so then he showed up and he was very, very casual. Like, and in my head, of course, you know, Goldust is Goldust.
Yeah.
But he shows up and he's got like jeans and cowboy boots and he's chewing tobacco, and it's like this doesn't add up. But yeah, he was very, very casual. And what's funny is that he was kind of on one of his hiatuses from WWE at that point. So
okay, yeah,
like he was just sort of doing the independent scene, just kind of getting his footing again. And he was almost like, I don't want to say he lacked confidence, but you can tell that he was kind of searching for himself in a way. Like, you know, to me, once you've been to that level, you know, you should just be walking on air at that point. Like, oh, I've been there and done that, and I have action figures, and I've been in video games. Like, you know, just listen to me, kid. But no, he was just, you could tell that he was kind of digging around, looking for just the right combination of words and moves, and you know, he was very, very particular about what he wanted to do that night. And I just had to kind of just roll with it. Like, yeah, man. Like, hey, whatever you want to do,
you're in charge.
You let me. So I finished up my match. I cut my short promo. He came out and he did like all the classic Goldust stuff. He kind of got away from that towards the end, but you know, he was crawling around and, you know, poking at me and doing all the classic Goldust stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's one of those. He took the mic, started to cut his promo. We got to his signature line, and right before he could finish it, I popped him right in the mouth. And you know, and it's funny because I was so nervous because, like, even though, you know, we're all wrestlers and we're all tough guys and all that, like, I didn't want to hurt him. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't want to be like that guy that hits
Goldust. Throw a punch of Goldust, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, knocks a tooth out, and then all of a sudden I'm in his autobiography, like, oh, clown, knocked out my tooth. You should never book him again. But,
right.
So yeah, like that, you know. But I hit him, did a little stuff, and then like I went to send him off the ropes, stuck my head, which is tactical error against a member of the Rhodes family. And now, of course, he ducks down, pops me, and then hit me with all his stuff. And it was very, very cool. And like as a little sort of backstory to that, I believe back in like 1996, 97, my uncle, who took me to most of my WWF shows back then, we were at the Allstate Arena, and I think it was a taping for, like, they were doing like a Saturday Raw or something. They had weird scheduling at the time. And it was a segment where Brian Pillman was out in the ring, and he was talking trash because he and Goldust were feuding, and he was talking trash, and then he drew out Goldust, and Goldust chased him all the way up through the crowd. Oh, wow. And when they ran by us, like, they literally ran up the section that we were in, and they were maybe like 10 seats away from us. And so Pillman runs up, he runs through the back area or whatever, and Goldust was right there at the end of our row. And it was always kind of a running gag between my uncle and I that he was trying to call Goldust over so that Goldust could then beat me up. You know, couldn't get Pillman, so my uncle was trying to get him, like, hey, get him instead. He was saying stuff. So like for years and years, we had that running joke, like, oh, you remember when Goldust almost kicked your ass in the show that one time? And, And then, of course, lo and behold, the way these things work out, like Goldust does eventually end
finally got you.
So, yeah.
Full circle.
So, it was kind of a cool touch.
Oh, that's amazing. So from your time then in PCW, then you end up going to Gali, you know, and you've been kind of all over the place, but primarily in Chicago as your home base, and things have started to, you know, develop, and we'll kind of get to where you are now. But what did that period of time then look like after you've kind of started to establish yourself? PCW's gone, and you're trying to make a name, and really at that time, for anyone who's not familiar, or you may be familiar with Chicago independent wrestling history, you know, you had your kind of your mainstays of independent wrestling for a long time, and then you know, obviously little ones pop up here and there over time, and then all of a sudden now you start to have you know, these new young companies starting to develop, like Underground and like Freelance in its initiations. Where did you find yourself fitting during that period of time? Were you working for a lot of different places? Did you have a primary home you know, promotion that you were really focusing on and working for?
So after PCW closed down, it was Gali mainly, and CSW was kind of the next one to take me in, because they've been around forever also. So I was able to go to a few of their trainings and just sort of get FaceTime with people, and ended up on a few of their shows, and just kind of did a little pop-up shows here and there. Like there was a company up in Janesville, Wisconsin that I was able to get on, that they were running for a minute. Premier Pro Wrestling, which is still around.
Yep.
They brought me in for a little bit here and there, so I was just kind of trying to get in where I fit in for a few years there. But then really where everything changed was freelance.
Yeah.
Like that was kind of the next big step in my career. I want to say that was about 2015, if I'm not mistaken. So I spent a couple of years kind of toiling away, and I'd heard of the freelance concept because it was sort of supposed to be a Chicago version of what Beyond Wrestling was doing.
Right.
It was supposed to be sort of empty arena shows, just have a bunch of the wrestlers around ringside, just get like good cameras, just get good footage so we could send out to, or they could send out to whoever. And it sounded like a cool concept, but then they went and started just doing actual shows. And I'd heard the buzz kind of building, and one of the first things I saw that made me realize that freelance was one of the places to be was they were putting out these really cool like highlight packages from their shows, and they were put to like really cool music, and they were at the Abbey pub, so you could see just people just hanging all over the place and screaming their heads off. And
really cool environment.
It was like the perfect environment for local pro wrestling. So I just sort of, again, like you do in wrestling, I went and just sort of put my face out there. I'd known Nick's for a while. We did a program in Premier Pro Wrestling, and I think we met at CSW. We had a couple matches there too. So I knew him and a bunch of the other guys that were already at freelance. So I just went and just kind of put my face out there, and I was fortunate enough to have enough people put in a good word for me where I got on just in a scramble. Like that was my first freelance show, and it's funny, he'll be happy that I give him credit for it, but it was actually D-Ray who I kind of give credit to for helping me establish myself at freelance, because so I was in there with like 5 other guys, all of them pretty much more established than I was.
Okay.
And so like we all get in, we all do our entrances, we're all standing there waiting, for the match to start. And I'm just kind of looking around, and I look over, and D-Ray was sitting in the crowd. I forget who he was with, but he started chanting GPA, and D-Ray's got that really booming voice sometimes. So like, and it was just sort of like monkey see, monkey do. So they heard D-Ray chanting GPA, and they're all like, "Yeah, GPA, GPA, GPA."
Crowd mentality.
Like, yeah, exactly. So all of a sudden, like I'm standing in there with these 5 other guys who are all like, kind of cool clout guys and whatever, and like this little nobody from Chicago is getting this like booming chant in this arena. So
in your debut, nonetheless.
Yeah, exactly. I never, didn't, at least in terms of like the freelance history, they didn't know me from Adam. So like, it was really interesting to see me getting that kind of response in my very first show. And it was just kind of off to the races from there. They couldn't really just ignore me after that. Like they had to figure something out for
right.
me. The rest is history anyway.
So how long then did it take from the time that match took place until you are main eventing shows and working your program, to eventually become freelance champion?
It was probably about maybe a year and a half. They had me doing like stuff. I would do scramble matches. I would do tag matches. Where I always say where I really became like a guy at freelance was actually not even on a show. It was at a galley practice. Because at the time, and I was seeing videos and clips and stuff, and it was always so cool because it was Mustafa Ali, DJ Z, Gringo Loco, and Skyday. They were all in Chicago at the time, and they were getting together on like Tuesdays and Thursdays and going out to Villa Park to practice, and they were just doing this really cool, like innovative, intricate stuff, and like it always like really caught my eye, and so I started going out there just wanting to learn things, but also just to get FaceTime with those guys. Those are all big names in their own respect. So so I remember like Ali and I would run some drills at that time, and we had pretty good in-ring chemistry, and so I remember I got there to a practice, and my next freelance match was going to be a scramble with Ali in it.
Okay.
So I'm getting dressed next to him, I just kind of nudge him, and I'm like, hey, so what do you think if we can work it out? Maybe you and I can kind of do some of this stuff that we're learning here. We can do that at the scramble. Just kind of show off what we learned. And he was like, oh yeah, that's fine, whatever. We can see if we can work something out. So, and like, in my head, I was like, yes, I got it. Now I can make my master plan get in motion. So I was able to coordinate it to where the scramble was 6 guys. So 2 guys started, they got out. The next 2 started, they got out. And the last 2 were me and Ali. And like, even without any sort of prior build-up, Ali was so established and I was on the rise. And so by the time he and I both got in there, like the second we both entered the ring, there was a buzz. There was definitely like an audible reaction from the crowd, like, ooh, this is interesting. We got kind of the established seasoned vet, the young upstart. We were kind of digging this. So that put the seed in I think Ali's mind, maybe in Nix's mind, and just kind of all the decision makers like, hey, I think we got something here. So starting with that scramble, that kind of set the ball in motion.
Incredible. And obviously for anyone who has followed freelance wrestling history have seen some of the great work that you and Ali have put on together and with Isaiah as well, and eventually leading to you becoming almost a Chicago Grand Champion for a significant period of time, holding many of the major championships in all of the promotions. Was that certainly a career highlight in terms of period of time in your life for being top guy at most of these local companies in Chicago?
Yeah, it was really interesting. It's one of those, I don't know if anything quite like that will happen again, because
all the stars had to align, certainly.
Yeah, they really did. And there's not always a sort of connection between the talent used in all those companies. So I was galley champion, or a galley champion. I think I was the galley champion. I was freelance champion. I had a CSW belt, and I was the underground champion.
Right.
Like all at the same time. And like if you take all those companies now, there's pretty distinct difference between the rosters on all those companies. So you're not going to get a lot of carryover between company to company. So the fact that I was representing all of them at the same time, it was pretty unique. And it was definitely one of maybe the proudest moment in my career when I was able to kind of solidify all those companies and really represent Chicago like to the fullest extent.
Absolutely. And to your credit, that's also, at a time when there's so much talent that's kind of going on, and to have that consistency all the way through. And you were very likable, I believe, at the time too, for the most part. At least I think for all those companies, you were a babyface as the champion, if I'm not mistaken. Which then kind of transitioned us to, and you obviously had a lot of good rivalries and programs for all of those championships at the time. And then I'd say probably the most other notoriable rivalry is between you and Kylie Ray, which, transcends both Chicago and just independent wrestling in general. And I think has provided a lot of great storylines. What was your relationship like with Kylie, even before getting to that point of being a tag team and then eventually becoming arch nemesis? Was a tag team something that you guys had been just kind of put together on that naturally worked out? Is it something that you had pursued based on you guys working together, or how did that come to be?
So I actually met Kylie before she even started training. Yeah. I remember the first day I met her, she was backstage at a galley show, I believe, because she had shown up with Jake, yep. Who was one of the galley guys at the time, and she was there, and she was just kind of doing what I did when I started, just kind of sitting off to the side, sort of putting her face out there, and sort of getting sort of her lay of the land. And I saw her all throughout her training, and so I was there as she was sort of establishing herself, and then she went off and moved off to Texas, and sort of really came into her own when she was down there. And then when she came back, she was the ROW Diamonds champ.
Right.
And so I know Nix was really trying to find a spot for her on freelance at the time, and so I was the freelance champion when she came back to Chicago, and she was the Diamonds champion. And so Nix just kind of saw it as a natural opportunity to sort of put everything together and get some cross promotion going. So he put me and Kylie together to face Joey Ryan and Candice on one of the freelance shows. So that's a real high profile match. You got a bunch of titles and different states involved, and the name recognition of Joey and Candice. So it was just kind of a perfect storm to have that match happen. And she and I had always been real friendly, behind the scenes. We weren't the best friends or anything, but we had good chemistry, and I liked what I was seeing from her in the ring.
Yeah.
And I was pretty comfortable with what I was doing by that point too. So, once we got in there, it was just with our personalities and our wrestling style, there was a good sort of natural cohesion there. And let's see, so they had us do that match, and I was I think I was right about at the tipping point as a babyface, because I had all the belts, I had the glorious moments, and people were getting a little bit tired of it by that point, because that's just the way the wrestling is. They're
of course,
all right, yeah, we're happy for you, but at the same time, screw this guy. What else is out there? What else is on? So we fleshed out the tag team thing for a little bit, and her popularity just continued to grow. Yeah. And it was happening at the same time that mine was dying painful death. I was getting booed, and I was crying, I was putting on a smiley face, and yeah, come on, yeah, but it was just it wasn't happening. They were deciding that they were pretty much done with me, and they were all about her. So by the time the split happened, it was time. It's kind of the perfect moment for it to happen.
Yeah, it seemed very natural and tend to work out, and the rest obviously is kind of history. So to that point too, I feel like there's a lot of controversy when it comes to intergender wrestling, but it's something that you have certainly participated in plenty of times and opportunities. What are your thoughts on intergender wrestling, and what are some of your rhetoric to those who may be opposed to it?
It's something that honestly I had to come around on. When I started back in 2010, it was pretty unheard of. It was certainly not on TV. I'm sure it was being done on the independent level to some extent, but I wasn't really aware of it. And just, the concept never appealed to me. I always thought there was a believability factor there that just didn't quite gel with me. But and also women's wrestling was at a different place.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You weren't getting a lot of credible athletes on television, and there were good women wrestlers out there, but they weren't being presented in the spotlight. So by the time Kylie and I started our feud, it was something where you just kind of have to look at it from I don't know if logic is the right word, but like look at superhero movies, for instance. Like, whereas at one time it was just, the big roided up, muscle bound guy who was the big action hero. But now you've got Black Widow, and you've got like all these various, superstar female superheroes out there. So like, and if it's a question of like physicality, with all due respect, there are a lot of male wrestlers out there who don't look like they could break the skin on a rice pudding.
No doubt. It's a good way to put it.
So like, if you like take Lainey for instance, like Lainey is a really, really well built woman. Like she's strong and tall, and like she's just got a lot of the traits that. There she goes. There you go.
Yeah, show it off.
The proof in the pudding right there. But she's as physically credible as a number of men out there. So it's one of those where like the playing field has really, really been leveled off, and even the rise of women in combat sports like Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm, and just there's been so many examples of how physically capable women are, and so like at this point in time, to me, there's no reason that women can't be presented on a comparable level to a lot of men. Like there are certain cases where it's a little off the charts. Like if a woman half the size of another guy is out there picking him up and slamming him around, so like it's a little ridiculous sometimes. But you can tell the story well enough to where it's believable. Where like for me and Kylie, I always felt like it was pretty believable that she could take me, I could take her. Like it was we were never stretching the bounds of believability too far. Like she's more than capable of handling herself, and I'm, just kind of a sniveling, backstabbing guy anyway. So like, if anything, she's tougher than I am in the way that we're presenting everything. So, yeah, like it, once upon a time, it was maybe a little bit unbelievable, but with the way that the world is now, with the way entertainment is now, with the way sports are now, it's as credible as anything else trying to get pro wrestling.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Is there anyone on the independent level or not signed these days, both men or women, that you haven't gotten a chance to work with that is kind of on your maybe short list of wish lists?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I'm to the point now where what I want to do in wrestling is just kind of whatever's going to get the most attention. So, like when I was coming up, there were so many names just in Chicago alone. Like Ali was up there, Brubaker was up there, Mason Conrad, Bryce Benjamin. Like there were all these names that were like sort of these pillars of Chicago alone. And now pretty much everybody works everywhere. Right. And I feel like one of the old heads. Like I've been around since before a lot of these guys even started training. So, yeah. So I mean, it's one of those where like I look more forward to the challenge of working different people who bring different things to the table. So it's not so much about names anymore. It's just about what's going to get the most eyes, what's going to get the most attention, and what's going to challenge me as a performer.
Yeah, which I think is super important, and especially now with there being so much change and uncertainty with the way that the world is even working, the way that we're consuming things. I think that's going to become more important than ever once we do start to get back to these things. Is what is it that you're putting out there that's going to make you stand out? And I think you do a really good job of that, especially just with social media and the things that you put out there and interactions and being able to stay connected outside, both while things were normal and wrestling was happening, and especially now, even when things are happening. Talk to me a little bit about the meme that you had put out there that got viral traction for those people who aren't familiar with it, where the idea came from and kind of your reaction as it started to blow up.
Yeah, so, obviously, as we're recording this, like Tiger King is the biggest thing in the world right now. It's just pure trash. Dog food.
Mindless television.
It's just the best kind of trash you can consume. So, as I was watching it, like, there's one character on the show who, like, he looks like, Walmart Batista. Like, he's just this, like, toothless, like, tattooed up, like, to me, every time he came on the screen, like, I had to kind of do a double take, like, oh wait, no, that's not him. So, like, and as I was looking through the memes and stuff, I was noticing nobody else was making that comparison. So I was like, is it just me seeing this? So I had to put the two pictures together, and I had to think of, like, just a clever, quick caption for it. And so, I was just sitting in my car, and I found the two pictures, and I was like, this should be funny. And so I just threw it up there, and I think my tactical error was I tagged Batista in the picture.
Did you?
So like, because I figured I might get like 50 likes and like maybe like 15 retweets. Maybe he'll see it and like it or something and be like, that was worth it. But I don't know like who the first one to like really send it off into the stratosphere was, but like within an hour it already had like hundreds of retweets and hundreds of likes, and it was like, whoa, we really got something here. And I noticed when I would get responses to it, it would always tag both me and Batista, and we were in quarantine at that point, and he was actually on Instagram Live at the time, so I know he was just sitting at home, like just on his phone with nothing else to do. So he's got to be wondering, like all of a sudden his phone's blowing up, like what the hell is this? So he I noticed we were both getting tagged, and then after a while it was only me getting tagged. So I was like, that's a problem. So I checked, and he unfortunately blocked me.
Blocked by Batista.
Yeah, blocked by Batista. I now have heat with Dave Batista. So yeah, he.
So clearly he saw it.
Yeah, like he at least laid eyes on it.
Yep.
But he was not amused and chose to take it out on me for that. But yeah, then it popped up everywhere. Like I saw Sasha Banks posted a version of it in her story. Jerry Lawler just tweeted it out a little while ago. So like, it really caught fire after that, and I'm very proud of like the attention that it got, because I thought it was a joke, but unfortunately the one guy that I was hoping to get the attention of not appreciate it the way I wanted to. But oh well, you win some, you lose some.
No doubt, it's so funny how that works out sometimes. So if we'll share it if anyone hasn't seen it. But I think it's amusing, and then obviously that flattery is certainly there when people are starting to make their own versions of it, for sure. But kudos to you for making that initial comparison.
Yeah, it's one of those where like I posted so many tweets and memes that I always feel like should get that attention, where it's like, oh, this is so clever and it's perfect, and then it'll get like 10 likes and it'll just fade off into the ether as most things do on the internet. But that was finally one that caught and got the appropriate attention that I feel like every one of my tweets should get.
It's a shining moment. So
yes.
Being from Chicago, and speaking of documentaries, then tonight will be the airing of Michael Jordan's documentary. Is that something you'll be tuning into? Are you a lifelong Bulls fan?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've been looking forward to that since they announced it last year or whatever it was. So that'll be cool, because I was thinking about it the other day. So I mean, obviously, growing up in Chicago in the '90s, like the Bulls were everything to everyone. But at the time, I was so young that I didn't fully comprehend like why everything came to an end the way that it did.
Yeah, right.
It always seemed like there was always friction between Michael and Phil and management, and like I generally understood, because I was 10 or 11 when it all fell apart. So I mean, like I generally understood it, but I never quite got the particulars or the different perspectives. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that, because those were like the formative years for most of us, just watching all that.
Absolutely. Whether you're from Chicago or not, especially if you are from Chicago, I mean, Bulls were kings of the world at that time, and obviously catapulted Michael Jordan to be the superstar that he is now. So I'm certain, I think everyone and their mother is going to be tuning into it, based on the fact that, one, there's not a lot of else out there to be tuning into as well, but the fact that they pushed this stuff and put it out there. So we'll certainly be paying attention to Twitter and seeing some reactions there, both from you and the world. So, other than that, in terms of the wrestling world, are you staying tuned in? Are you watching weekly programming? Are you guys kind of keeping on the up and up with things that are going on in the wrestling world?
Yeah, I feel like my last bit of like major investment was WrestleMania. Yeah, because we were all just sort of adjusting to what was going on. Like they were starting to do empty arena shows for AEW and WWE, and it was always a little bit weird. And then I feel like WrestleMania got like the most out of the circumstances that they could have. And I've tried to keep up with the product, at least in a general sense, both AEW and WWE, because they're literally the only ones doing anything right now. But it's just hard. Wrestling needs crowds. Like it's always been kind of a symbiotic relationship. Like wrestling needs the crowds, and the crowds need their wrestling. So taking away that element is really just damaging to the level to which you can enjoy things, and also just it kind of tugs at your heartstrings a little bit, knowing that none of us can be out there doing that. And even it almost just changes the perception of like what we're trying to get to also, because obviously the world's going to come out of this, but in your head you think like, oh, I'm going into this next show with the hopes that I can get out there in front of 70,000 people and perform for the roar of the crowd, and then you look at what WrestleMania was and there was literally nobody there. So
it's crazy.
It just kind of affects the perception of everything and just sort of brings you down. Not that it's to the detriment of anybody that was out there doing their thing, but just you can't feel the same way about wrestling that you want to when you watch stuff that's in front of nobody. So I keep tabs on things just because you have to, being an active part of the industry. But yeah, it's getting harder and harder to kind of lose yourself in what we're watching.
Yeah, and for you specifically, the crowd is really critical when it comes to your persona and even the way that you're being perceived over the last couple of years, with being basically one of the top bad guys in the Chicagoland area, if not professional wrestling. Hashtag beat up GPA being a trend that seems to never go away. But now with the way that things are and coming back, in the same way that your rise to popularity started to fade after a while, do you think that there's going to be fatigue that sets in at some point of people booing you and eventually the tide will turn again? And is that something that you would help kind of push over the edge, or are you enjoying the attention you're receiving no matter what?
You have to be adaptable when it comes to wrestling. Like I remember when JBL was WWE champion, who also has me blocked on Twitter. When that was when he was on top, he put out a blog at the time talking about how he didn't want any merchandise. He hated when the people would chant his name at shows because it was never his job to be liked. It's always the tendency of crowds, when something's been done for a while, they want to go the opposite direction. So they've been cheering you for a long time, eventually they want to boo you. Mm-hmm. Booing you for a long time, eventually they want to cheer you. But if it's your role being given to you by a promoter or just what you want to do yourself, you have to find a way to keep doing what you're doing. And like that's your job. You're not supposed to go the other way. You're supposed to do what you're supposed to do. So like when it comes to the heel stuff, I mean, I've been doing it for a good 2+ years now, and in a lot of ways it's still got as much strength as it ever did, but at the same time I also need the people to feed off of, and so like me and Kylie can't do our thing forever. It's one of those, I'm kind of adaptable. Like if there's more to be done, and there's always more to be done. Like we can find more targets, we can find more reasons for me to do the things that I do. But if it's to the point where we can't sway the people and they're just loving me for being who I am, which is how they should be anyway. If it gets to that point, then we'll roll with that too. But no, it's one of those, like, as long as people are interested and as long as I'm relevant, which is kind of the key word in wrestling nowadays, like, I'm good with it. Like, whatever I have to do, I'll do what needs to be done.
Absolutely. And I think that's really the only way you can do, and we appreciate you putting yourself out there any way that you can, especially right now when we have such limited abilities to take in content from you and everybody else. So for the time being, while we're kind of working on navigating through all of this, what are some ways that fans and wrestling fans alike, both of yours and not, can find you, can support you, can discover you, and really just kind of absorb all things GPA right now?
Yeah, I mean, the most direct ways are, I'm most active on Twitter. GPA Thinks is my Twitter handle. I'm on Instagram quite a bit. That's GPAIG. I've had people ask about merchandise. I'd say via one of those mediums, you can contact me about that. I don't have a pro wrestling tee store or anything. I don't have like a direct means of getting my merchandise. I'm very flattered by the idea of people wanting to get my merchandise. But I also want to tell people, like, especially at a time like this where there are so many full-time wrestlers who are out of work right now who need as much financial support as they can get. Like, I'm fortunate enough to where wrestling has never been my sole source of income. Yeah, so, like, while I will obviously take financial support, I'm not in dire need of it the way that some people are. So, like, if people are desperate for T-shirts or 8x10s or whatever, I'm more than happy to oblige. But like, if they have a finite amount of money that they're looking to spend on independent wrestling, I do encourage people to seek out the ones who truly need it. I mean, Laney could use it. There are a number of people who could use that financial support. So yeah, like, if you're dying for a GPA shirt or whatever, like, feel free to hit me up on one of those mediums. But like don't feel that you need to, because like fortunately I'm as we're recording this, I'm okay.
Yeah.
But if that changes, I'll let you know, and I'll be standing outside your door with my hat in my hand.
For sure. Well, it's very first class of you, and we hope that it continues to stay that way for as long as it possibly needs to or possibly can. And I'm very hopeful that as long as there are individuals like ourselves and like those who are listening who are able to oblige to the restrictions and everything going on right now, that hopefully we'll get out of this much quicker than necessary, and at some point we'll get back to business as usual, or some form of business as usual, so that we can continue sharing your craft and get the people what they deserve.
I've noticed a lot of the sentiment on wrestling Twitter and even just Twitter in general, with kind of the American mindset is always, we want to fight against the things that are oppressing us or that we don't like. We always feel that like our determination can get us through any number of things, and it's like it's so counterintuitive, because the best thing we can do right now is nothing. Like, we have to just relax, and it's not going to help to get out there and protest, because the virus doesn't care about your protests. Like, it has no concern for your personal feelings. Like, we have to listen to scientists, we have to listen to responsible leaders, which is debatable which ones are and which ones aren't, but we have to be responsible. We have to care about more people than ourselves. Like, I think that's what a lot of people don't understand, is that like if I get it, like, chances are I'm gonna be fine, but people I know will not be fine. My parents will not be fine. Like, people that are immunocompromised that I don't know, my neighbors, they're not going to be fine. So like, we need to put others before ourselves, which is very hard for a lot of people. And I get it, but at the same time, like, we have to understand that the less we do is going to mean the more that we can do sooner. Like, if you want to get out there, you want to do shows, you want to go to the movies, you want to go to the beach, whatever, like, we can do that, but we can't do that if we don't relax and listen to smart people. Like, intelligence is so important right now. We need to appreciate it more.
No doubt. Listen to GPA, people. Preaching the good word, and it is 1,000% exactly what we need to do right now, which is just don't do anything.
Yep.
The more we don't do anything, the quicker we will get through this, and the quicker it will go away, and we'll take proper precautions that are necessary to prevent anything like this from ever happening again. But until then, just do your part for whether it's for yourself or not, for everyone else, because at the end of the day, this is a global pandemic, and it's not just states, it's not just America, and everybody is clearly being affected by it, both from the medical standpoint, from the economic standpoint, and both of those things need to get better much more quickly before they get any worse. So appreciate your sentiment and your rhetoric on this, because I think it's valid, and I think hopefully it will resonate with people. At least I'm hopeful that it resonates with people, because it needs to.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's all the conspiracy theorists and all that. Like, nobody's happy right now. Nobody is benefiting from this. Like, everybody's suffering. Everybody from multimillionaires to Joe Schmo. We're all sitting at home. We're all bored. We're all restless. Like, we're all in the same boat. We all want to get out of that boat, but it's not going to happen unless we act responsibly. And it's like, and wrestlers in particular are driving me crazy. Like, I know as soon as a ring goes up anywhere in the world, they're going to start flocking to those rings and try and do their underground, not underground, but like, they're going to try to do their little secret shows and gatherings and all that. But like, we just got to relax, people. Like, we got to take this seriously, and the more nothing we do will lead to more something soon. So
no doubt about it.
We just got to play it cool.
Absolutely. Well, I certainly appreciate your take on everything. Appreciate your time and you doing your part. And thanks for chatting. I think this has been a fun time, and I think the people are certainly going to enjoy it, whether they thought they needed it or not. I think it's certainly something that will be well received. So appreciate the time, and hopefully we get to do this again very soon.
Yeah, hopefully. And I'm not busy, so anytime.
Awesome. Well, enjoy the Last Dance documentary today, and we'll certainly be talking soon. Appreciate it, Jeff.
Yep, thank you.
Take care.
You too.